Did you know that the city of Boston has a chief of resilience? Yes, that is correct. Boston's chief resilience officer is Dr. Itea Martin. Now, you're probably wondering what Dr. Martin does all day. And when I initially heard about the role of the Chief Resilience Officer, the first thing that came to mind was that this was somehow related to Boston Strong, the shorthand way for talking about the incredible resilience that our city became known for after the Boston Marathon bombing. But this position actually predates the Boston Marathon bombing by several years. The position was not even created in Boston. It was envisioned by the Rockefeller Foundation in the aftermath of Hurricane Katrina to provide support to the city and to the people of New Orleans. Their belongings and many of their lives literally drowned in one of the worst hurricanes in American history. Since 2005, the foundation has funded positions like this one in Boston in 100 cities across the country. Many of the early appointments in these cities were made as a response to disasters in their areas, like that of Katrina. But more recently, in the case of Houston, city leaders have taken more proactive positions and have appointed chief resilience officers to help prevent or curtail such natural disasters. How ironic it is that just 4 months after he was appointed to the position by Mayor Sylvester Turner, Houston's chief resilience officer suggested using city money to help expedite drainage projects in Harris County and purchase land for regional drainage space. Resilience is defined as the capacity to recover quickly from difficulty. It is the ability of an object or a person to bounce back into shape. It is elasticity. The interesting question that has emerged as a result of the Rockefeller Foundation funding is whether governments and leaders can actually teach and implement resilience. Philosophically, the question is resilience a skill set that can be taught or an innate set of human responses? Or is it both? Moreover, can an entire city or regional population center like Houston or Boston learn how to prepare and practice resilience together? My friends, during this past year, many of us have had to practice resilience. And as a lifelong Buffalo Bills fan, growing up, I learned the true meaning of the word resilience, and as a young person, I learned to recognize the resilience of my fellow Buffalonians. Somehow, we still root for our team, even when loss and failure seem inevitable. Substitute any other sports teams with similar history if you wish. I think I learned resilience from all of those years watching my father and my uncle absorb the epic tragedy we lovingly call our hometown team. Sports may be actually one of the reasons why Bostonians are so resilient. All those generations waiting for the Red Sox to win the World Series. Resilient people, however, predate the NFL or Major League Baseball. The Bible is filled with individuals who are resilient. After being tossed out of the Garden of Eden, the first human beings, Adam and Eve, somehow still created a life for themselves. And think of Joseph, nearly murdered by his brothers, sold into slavery, falsely accused of rape. He could have disappeared easily into nothing. Instead, he literally made his way out of the pit, went to Egypt, and worked himself to be the number 2 man in power in Pharaoh's court. Later, when Joseph's brothers saw him again, he somehow found a way to forgive them. That's resilience. Moses absorbed the failures of the Israelites again and again, and even had his own moment of anger when he became frustrated with his people and destroyed the first set of 10 commandments. He went back up Mount Sinai, carved a new set of tablets, resolving to strengthen his own patience and tolerance. Resilience was one of the attributes Moses wished upon Joshua as Joshua took leadership of the Jewish people. Jonah's story, which we will read tomorrow as part of our afternoon service, also gives evidence of great resilience on his part. Jonah, as you remember, was thrown overboard during the storm. He was swallowed by a great fish. For 3 days and 3 nights, he was tossed around in the belly of this great fish as it swam into the depths of the sea. But then the Bible tells us, God spoke to the fish, and it spewed out Jonah onto dry land. Jonah gets up, wipes the seaweed off his face, and is rewarded for his resilience and given another chance. The text reads, the word of God came to Jonah the second time. Resilience is our human response to chronic suffering. I just finished reading a wonderful book by David McCullough called The Wright Brothers. These brothers were well known for their persistence as they worked to discover the solution as to how motorized flight might work. Despite their many struggles and setbacks, each moment offered an opportunity to move forward. One diary entry by Orville Wright recorded a day of damaged steering, faulty landings, the rudder breaking, a crash at the start, a wing hitting the ground, and a broken propeller. But he writes, the good humor of Wilbur after the spill out of the machine, or a malfunction somewhere, or a stubborn motor, was always reassuring. No one believed that these 2 bicycle makers from Dayton, Ohio, had any chance of flying. Nevertheless, they pressed on, focused on their work and their ideas. After each crash, they regrouped by way of an extended debriefing with one another, where there was always some new understandings that emerged. The support of the brothers for each other, their ability to learn from the past, and their insistence of shaping their own future demonstrate 3 of the essential skills in being resilient. After many years of silent resilience, Holocaust survivor and author Elie Wiesel found the words to teach us about the extent to which human beings can leverage resilience and survive even the most inhumane circumstances. Elie Wiesel credits our ancestor Isaac, whom we read about last week on Rosh Hashanah morning. Wiesel calls him the first survivor. Years ago, Wiesel wrote a moving essay highlighting Isaac's ability to turn unspeakable suffering into love and ultimately into laughter. In his essay, Wiesel notes that the name Yitzchak comes from the root to laugh. Laughter was Sarah's response when she learned her husband would father a child in his own age. And years later, as we read last week, when Abraham almost sacrifices Isaac, what is Isaac's response? Despite the trauma of being bound and almost murdered by his father, Isaac marries, has children. He refuses to let this experience embitter him. If we can do this, writes Wiesel, turn away from bitterness, open our hearts, we will discover people who will support us, and we may even find a God who will give us inner strength to overcome, and ultimately, perhaps one day, to laugh. Over the past 5 years, there has been significant research conducted on resilience in children and teens. But what about adults? Is resilience in grown-ups learned, inherited, instinctive? You will be glad to know that although researchers have found that some people are more hardwired towards resilience than others, resilience can be learned over time by even those that believe that they are not strong enough to bear the burdens that they carry. Moreover, Wharton School of Business professor Adam Grant has discovered that the best time for adults to focus on resilience building is during middle age. So in deciding to fund and select chief resilience officers around the country, the Rockefeller Foundation was onto something important. What researchers have learned is that resilience can only be built through personal experiences that are painful or difficult in nature. Resilience is built on moving through the darkness of suffering, the light of living again. In 2001, a 13-year-old Israeli boy named Kobe was murdered by terrorists. In her book, The Road to Resilience, his mom, Sherry Mandel, writes, "Unfortunately, I am an expert in the process of resilience. And what I have learned is that resilience is about becoming, not overcoming. When you face a trauma, you are in danger of breaking apart. Yet that same sense of vulnerability and fracture can lead you towards connecting to something greater than yourself, connecting to others, connecting to God." In memory of their son, Kobe, the Mandels created the Kobe Mandel Foundation, an organization that runs Camp Kobe and other programs for bereaved families. Mandel writes, "I have witnessed resilience. Resilience is not a personal quality that a few lucky ones possess. Instead, each of us can build resilience." She suggests that if we embrace 7 ideas or principles, we will put ourselves on the path toward cultivating spiritual resilience within a Jewish context. Number 1, chaos. Most people are terrified of chaos. But if you don't enter, you may never leave the pain behind. Even in chaos, there can be a sense of amazement. You can't see it now, but there is wonder waiting for you. Second, community. You can't handle this alone, whatever it is. We are responsible for one another. Resilience is the ability to receive the kindness that others will give to you, to let other people in. Third, choice. The world is predicated on free choice. One of the first things that God offered Adam was the choice of eating from the tree of knowledge. He was the one who decided. You have the possibility of making choices that will bring you comfort. Fourth, creativity. God is the master of creativity, and we can translate our pain into creativity, into renewal. The Kobe Mandel Foundation runs mosaics classes for bereaved mothers. There are no mistakes in mosaics. Think about it. You can always find a design to include and incorporate flaws. And that revised design may be more original and beautiful than what you had planned. In the same way, you may also create a new self, one who is more courageous and compassionate. 5, commemoration. We often repress or deny difficult experiences, but Judaism is all about remembering. Research has found that children who know their family stories are more resilient than other children. Our knowledge of the Jewish national story may in fact contribute to the national resilience of the Jewish people. 6, consecration. Each suffering has a message to disclose. That message will tell you what action you will need to take to heal your corner of the world. The stone the builders discarded has become the cornerstone. We read that in Psalms. In this way, resilience is not a process of closure, but disclosure. And finally, celebration. In finding your mission, in transforming, you experience an expanded sense of self. And in that expression, there is celebration. Resilience is connected to the word for silence and also to the word for salience. What once may have silenced you, what felt beyond language, now propels you to find salience, a heightened sense of meaning and significance, a deeper conversation with God. This past month has surely taught us that the world we live in remains far from predictable. Meet Jim McInvale, the owner of Gallery Furniture in Houston. Jim relates the following. When the hurricane first hit, my thought was it was going to be a one-day event. When I came into work the next day, I saw the devastation of the entire area and decided it would be best if we opened our 100,000 square foot furniture store as a shelter. Between that store and another in West Houston, they had 400 people living in these makeshift shelters who were trying to get back on their feet. McInvale calls himself Mattress Mac on Twitter. He tweeted the people were welcome in the stores. McInvale goes on to say, "My daughter's favorite saying is, if not for my struggle, I would not have known my strength." All of Texas, all of Florida, all of Puerto Rico is struggling now, but it will help us to be more resilient, strong human beings who will go on to give back to their community. Yom Kippur is not about starting over. It is about resolving to live better. With Yom Kippur, we have the chance to improve our life stories, to add illustrations and color and texture to the book of our life. It is the day of judgment, but the rabbis point out the power of Yom Kippur lies in our human ability to judge our own lives and our own deeds, because improving ourselves is the first step in improving the world. Ultimately, each of us is chief of resilience over our own life. I conclude with a famous story of Olympic runner Derek Redmond. Redmond arrived at the 1992 Summer Games in Barcelona, determined to win a medal in the 400-meter race. The race begins and Redmond breaks from the pack and quickly seizes the lead. Down the back stretch, only 175 meters away from the finish, he hears a pop in his right hamstring. His leg buckling, Redmond begins hopping on one leg, slows down, and falls on the track. At the same time, Derek Redmond's father, seeing his son in trouble, races toward him from the top row of the stands. He has no credentials to be on the track, but all he thinks about is getting to his son to help him up. As the medical crew arrives with the stretcher, Redmond tells them, "No, there's no way I'm getting on that stretcher. I'm going to finish my race." In a moment that will live forever in the minds of millions, Redmond lifts himself to his feet ever so slowly and starts hobbling down the track. Slowly, the crowd of 65,000 in total disbelief rises and begins to roar. One painful step at a time, Redmond limps onward, and the crowd, many in tears, cheer him on. When Derek's father finally gets to the bottom of the stands, he leaps over the railing and reaches his son at the final curve, about 120 meters from the finish. He wraps his arm around Derek's waist. "I'm here, son," he says softly, hugging the boy. "We'll finish together." Derek puts his arms around his father's shoulder and sobs. together, arm in arm, Father and Son, they finish the race. Each of us, we all are Derek Redmond. We have all fallen. We have all experienced hardships. And we can all get back up. We need not be the swiftest or the strongest. What counts is that we commit ourselves to a life of purpose and resilience, a life of teshuvah, tefillah, and tzedakah, forgiveness, faith, and community. The narrative of our lives that was 5777 has concluded. Our slate is now clean. The pages that lie ahead are blank, primed to receive the ink of a new year. Who will rest? Who will wander? Who will be tranquil and who will be troubled? Who will be exalted and who will be humbled? I do not have the answers, but I hope that together, arm in arm, we will all finish the race. Amen.